The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the OSIP Foundation Incorporated or any other group or individual. This podcast may contain dialogue or subject material that could be considered for mature audiences only. All aspects of how you play the game and the OSIP Foundation Incorporated are protected by copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Unauthorized use without the express written consent of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated is strictly prohibited. If you're interested in sponsoring How You Play the Game, please email us at podcast@osipfoundation.org. Your sponsorship may be tax deductible. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of How You Play the Game, the official podcast of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated. Yours truly, Jack Furlong, with you as we talk to you about what's going on as far as the world of sportsmanship is concerned. This is the first episode of the month of December. The year's flying, it's almost over. The year is 2025. As always, check us out online at osipfoundation.org. If you would like to contact the show, please use the email address podcast@osipfoundation.org, on the socials at facebook.com/osipfoundation, X and Instagram at osipfoundation, hashtag how you play the game. So here in America, we just celebrated Thanksgiving. Hope everyone's celebrating had a wonderful holiday. We are now in the official start of the holiday season as we approach the end of the calendar year. This is when things obviously start to get nuts for people and probably, gives us all another good reason to either escape the insanity or just develop a nice drinking habit. Either is really acceptable, or do both. They're not mutually exclusive. But in kicking off the holiday season with Thanksgiving, I imagine that, a lot of people probably have this experience in terms of the holidays and the get-togethers with family and friends and whatnot. And that involves, the stereotypical assumptions that come sometimes with warnings from other family members, like you gotta act a certain way around these guests. You gotta avoid talking religion and politics and stuff like that. And and there's an element of respect there, which I completely understand. But what's funny is that in my Thanksgiving experience this year, I kind of experienced it a little differently. And it got me thinking about sportsmanship and the holidays in terms of these types of conversations and how we have them and some of the things that occur when we have them. It's no surprise that we live now in a very, very touchy time, a very sensitive time. I firmly believe that, anything post not just 2016, but 2020 has led to very extreme views, very aggressive points of view on all sides. I think back to when I was in Indianapolis for the officials consortium with the NFHS a couple of years ago. And our good friend Dana Pappas, who's been on the show, went over this point a couple of times. And she said, when we were coming out of COVID, we thought that people were going to be nicer to one another because of how grateful they would be to escape lockdown and whatnot. And it turns out that the exact opposite was true. People were nastier. People were meaner. And I when you reflect on that, you're like, wow, that actually makes sense. And to me, like in my personal experience, I get that because I think that, there are elements where when you're open enough about it to vulnerably examine it, you realize that the psychological damage that was done, whether that be a general hurt, a depression, an anxiety, anger, fear, aggression. If I can go down the Star Wars path a little bit. We came out of that subconsciously ready to kill one another, because of what had happened, with almost feeling like you're incarcerated. So, when we look at the family gatherings, in the holidays now, the potential for those types of awkward conversations can occur. And for me, let me say this too. I'm no saint. I don't think any of us are. I think we've all had experiences in our lives where, when we can reflect on them, we realize I'd like to have that one back. It's kind of the best way that I can describe it. I heard this described very, very eloquently, like, yeah, I reserve the right to change my mind about something like this, which is essentially like saying, when I said it, I meant it, and now I'm like, oh, geez, now I see that was terrible, So I don't want to make myself come off as this all-knowing individual who will always have the truth and will always have the ability to tell other people what is right or wrong or anything like I that's the farthest thing from my mind. I'm just merely here to share a story and some thoughts about this. So I'm at Thanksgiving, and certain topics are coming up about various things that could be related to politics. I think we were talking about like COVID shots and stuff like that. And, when I'm looking around the table where I'm celebrating, you got people all over the place. You got a lot of moderates who might lean one way or the other. And then you got at least one person who's far one way. And, thankfully, I don't think we had anybody, we were close to maybe people who were leaning, kind of the other way as well. But it was a real recipe for a reason to have yet another round of drinks. You know what I mean? So someone suggested, I think when we were talking, I'm going to go down the line of using the COVID immunizations and COVID vaccines just so that we have a vehicle here. Please know that I'm not trying to take a side one way or the other or tell anybody what they should feel one way or the other about this. I'm just using this as the catalyst to the story that I'm trying to tell. So people start talking about that, and one person says, yeah, my doctor told me not to get it this year because I'm older and I think I had it recently, and there's whatever. Okay, fine. And then another person was just like, really, that's interesting. That I would think that, we wouldn't ever get to that point. We should be pushing the vaccines constantly and whatnot. And, people were dying from all of this and yada, yada, yada. And, I think I commented something like, well, remember that, different people had different experiences with COVID, that it was, we really made a decision with the vaccine to, reject the long-term data need in order to get the vaccine out and try and save lives. Good, bad, or indifferent, whether you want to believe in another theory or not is fine. But that's kind of the lay of the land of what had happened. And as a result of that, we've kind of created a little bit of a monster with it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, again, that we should or should not get it. It's just that's kind of what happened. And that's kind of also why the truth has become very subjective. We live in a time where the truth, what is really true can be manipulated very, very easily based upon the dissemination of information. And the person with whom I was explaining all of this, or to whom I was explaining all of this, was like, but the truth should not be subjective. The truth is objective. And I said, yeah, but you have to remember that, consider, different parts of the United States where they had different experiences with COVID. Like if you look at, the southern states, they had a lot less lockdown than we did here in New Jersey. They were preventative for a small amount of time, and then it was like practically over for them. Really, I'm sure they had some restrictions, and I'm sure they continued to practice some caution, but it wasn't what it was that we experienced. And the person with whom I was debating this was saying, and that's why people died, and that's why they were stupid and this, that, the other. And I said, I feel like that's not the case here. You have to remember that people in southern states, they live in a much warmer climate. The traditional cold and flu season exists because when weather gets colder, people tend to congregate indoors. So that increases possibilities and probabilities. Without that, down south, people continue to congregate outside in the months where we in New Jersey would probably be inside. So, that just kind of skews the statistics a little bit. And as I'm experiencing this debate with this person, what I'm realizing is that what this person is experiencing is something where they have set up a boundary and a defense mechanism in order to try and make sure that they are always right. They cannot be proven incorrect. They are almost ready to go into the argument, the debate, the battle over this. And that was never really my intention, at the dinner table. The fact of the matter is that when these things get brought up, sometimes you want to continue a conversation and be adult about it and try and say, well, this is what I think and whatnot. And we have really lost the ability to be willing to share ideas in a meaningful, respectful, and sportsmanlike way. And as the table kind of broke up a little bit, I was speaking with other people who were there, who I knew were definitely much more, on the opposite moderate side of me. And I said, what's funny is that in situations like this, what I learned, one of the things I learned when I was in seminary was about how breakthrough learning ends very early in life, and how we lack the ability as we get older to consider a viewpoint from another person that may not align with what we have to say. We immediately reject it because we're not willing to accept the fact that there could be other information out there. And that applies to so many different things. I mean, I'm learning this in seminary, and we're using that to discuss religion and spirituality. But the truth is that applies in a lot of different places. So, the people with whom I was speaking as I was saying this were like, oh, that's interesting. I never considered that. And I said, to me, it's something that is, very powerful, because you learn to accept a level of ambivalence, and change the tack at which you converse with other people. You don't go in guns a-blazing, into these types of scenarios. You're not there to try and convince other people. You're there to just share thoughts and opinions and kind of leave it to others to formulate their own opinions. We so frequently in this world, have to be right. We have to be right. We can't let another person tell us we're wrong. It's we take it as such a slight. It's very much like if you're watching a game on TV, a ball game of any sort, and an official makes a call that goes against your team. You're on the couch miles away from this game, and you're getting upset about it like it's a slight against you. A call that you don't like against your team, the team for which you are rooting, must mean there's something wrong with you. And we're like, what are you doing? And we start yelling at the TV and whatnot. When in reality, we need to take a step back and say, maybe he saw it differently. Maybe the official saw it differently. That doesn't mean we have to agree with it. That doesn't mean we have to like it. But the person hired to make that call saw it a particular way and called it a particular way. and we can discuss it and figure out why they called it that way, and then formulate our own opinion on it, and then we move on. And that's, unfortunately, not even how we have these conversations at the dinner table at holidays. Is it better that maybe we just continue to avoid those types of subjects when we are with family and friends at holiday gatherings? I'm sure an argument could be made that, yes, that is the best way to go. And I am not about to refute that, But what I am trying to say is that I wonder if we can all do a better job of saying, can I listen to other people, but can I also express myself in a way that highlights that these are my opinions and that I'm not trying to coerce someone into agreeing with me, nor am I trying to defeat an opponent. When I think back to myself at the Thanksgiving dinner table, as I'm trying to, kind of make my point, at no point am I thinking to myself, I have to defeat this person who doesn't agree with me. No, I'm not. I'm just saying, look, two things can be true at the same time. Your feeling about COVID, the pandemic, the vaccines, all that can all be true. But that can be true here in New Jersey, while people living in a southern state can have a different experience. It's not about whose experience is right or wrong. It's about saying, why did they experience it that way? And why did we experience it this way? And learning from that. And granted, yes, hindsight is always 20/20, folks. Okay? Knowing what we know now, if we had taken that back then, would we have done things differently? You're damn right we would have. We absolutely would have. But unless Marty McFly is showing up right now with a DeLorean, not a lot we can do about it. You know what I'm saying? So I guess the point here is that sportsmanship can exist at the family gathering. And the best way to exhibit it is to choose words, choose tacts, choose arguments, phrases, sayings, dispositions that show vulnerability, that show accountability for one's own thoughts and opinions. You can create a discussion and say, listen, this is my opinion and solely my opinion on why I feel a particular way. This is what I experienced, and this has led me to feel and think this way. And if anyone wants to come back at you and then say, well, you're wrong, well, then that's on that person. And then okay, I can't have a normal conversation with this person because it does kind of take two to tango here. But I do genuinely feel that so much of the issues, the conflict that we have at these holiday dinner tables exists because we lack the ability to be vulnerable, to express things properly, and to try and realize that two things can be true at the same time. Someone else having a different experience than you does not negate your experience. And you have the option and the ability to hear what another person has to say, consider it, think about it, and say, you know what, maybe that works for you. It doesn't necessarily work for me. And that's okay. And it can all be done by choosing words properly. Changing the tone in one's voice to say something without coming across as direct, as imperative, as commanding. And I think, as we approach the major milestones of the 2025 holiday season, I encourage those who are listening to try and think about that in their everyday lives. I know I have, and one of the things that I found myself doing as a result of that, is kind of just turning off the outside noise. You know, the television and the YouTube and the social media that speaks to sensationalize and exaggerate, you know, the news in a way that may or may not shill for one side or the other. I just, you know, I just leave it alone. And and ignorance becomes bliss. I may be a little bit behind the times, but, you know, again, the truth has become subjective, and the truth has become something where unless we are there to experience it, we're relying on another person who may be biased a particular way to give us that information. You know, so I encourage individual thought. I encourage openness, you know, the sharing of ideas in a vulnerable way. And I truly believe that using some of these ideas can make for a more sportsman-like experience when you gather with your family and friends to celebrate these holidays. And I'm curious to know what you have to think about that, if you've had experience about that, because I'll be willing to bet that many people have had more of the old-fashioned traditional attacking going on, where they say, I feel this way, and no, you're wrong, and you're going back and forth and back and forth. I wonder if people have the ability to say, hey, can we talk about this in a way that shows that these are what the things that we each individually believe, and it's possible that another person could feel a different way. Because when we start to feel things like that, when we start to think about things that way, man, the stress just goes away. It's really, really a wonderful feeling when you start to lose those burdens, where you feel like, I don't have to convince somebody. I don't have to save others, convince them to join my side. I can just be me. I can follow what I believe. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So anyway, that's enough for today. I thank you all for joining me. We will talk to everybody in just a few short weeks. As always, check us out online at osafoundation.org. Contact the show with the address podcast@osafoundation.org, facebook.com/osafoundation, X and Instagram @osafoundation, hashtag how you play the game. Until we speak again, treat each other with respect. How You Play the Game is a production of the OSIP Foundation, Incorporated. The producer-engineer of this episode is Sean Ryan. Music by SoundSpring Studio. The executive producer of How You Play the Game is Jack Furlong. For more information, visit osipfoundation.org.